time for Dave 101.
All right. A long time ago, I was told by a source very close to the UFO field that there was 3 phases to UFOs. The first phase started back in the To the Stars Academy era in 2017, where we were told there's something in our sky. We don't know what it is. We call it UAP. It could be the Russians. It could be the Chinese. It could be some sort of foreign adversary. No, we are not saying UFOs. No, do not bring up the topic of aliens because it has nothing to do with that. Then, 2 years ago, phase 2 started. That's when we started hearing, well, maybe it isn't the Chinese. Maybe it's not the Russians. Maybe it is not any foreign adversary. In fact, we don't know where these craft are coming from. We don't know where these Tic Tacs are just coming out of thin air, flying at 80,000 feet per second. All right? We don't know this, but we know it's not man-made. Now, my sources told me that phase 3 was still 3 to 5 years away. What's phase 3, you ask? Well, that's the introduction to extraterrestrials. Over the last number of months, we've talked about this on the show, where all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the Pentagon mentioned the word extraterrestrial. Then, not even 2 weeks later, we heard the word extraterrestrial coming out of the mouth of NASA's Bill Nelson. We've also heard people like Chris Mellon talk about ETs. We've heard Luis Elizondo talk about ETs. We've heard Avi Loeb talk about extraterrestrial technology. And recently, Chris Mellon and Jim Semivan coming up and talking about his experience with his wife in being abducted. Phase 3 has begun. But where it finally solidified, and this may be a link to further disclosure, was in an article that a good journalist picked out coming out of the DURDS report, the 1,500 pages that came out. Okay? Now, thank God a reporter named Emma Perry for the U.S. Sun was actually paying attention. Why? Because in this latest report, they talked about military people having everything from headaches, loss of hair, fevers, nightmares, nosebleeds, burnt skin, heart palpitations, and other health situations regarding anomalous encounters with UAP. Look, for years, the experiencers have been crying about this. This is not new news, but what it is that the Pentagon maybe accidentally released this. Why? We don't know. I'll quote the story. Sufficient incidents and accidents have been accurately reported and medical data acquired as to support a hypothesis that some advanced systems are already deployed and opaque to full U.S. understandings. The medical analysis will not require the intervention of an alternative biophysics do indicate to the use of, and to us, unconventional and advanced energy systems. This is exactly what we saw with Stefan Mikulik in 1967 with the Falcon Lake, Manitoba incident, where he was burnt on his chest and it had a pattern of dots. This is what we have heard from experiencers who have missing time, apparent abductions, unaccounted for pregnancies, sexual encounters, experience of telepathy, perceived teleportation. Now, the report also featured a useful database coming from MUFON, which is also intriguing. Look, we could go over example over this, but I called one of my sources up way before the show tonight, who's very close to this situation. And I said, dude, what is this being leaked? He goes, I sent him a text message with that. And he goes, I will call you in a few. And his answer was, my friend, this is blowing my mind. I don't know who's releasing this or who even got permission or whether it was leaked out. What I do know is that it was not Luis Elizondo. He knew about it, but he did not release it. This came strictly out of the DURDS program. And this is something that the U.S. government has never admitted to, that there are people out there having experiences, military people. Look, this goes way beyond Rendlesham, ladies and gentlemen. This goes way beyond the incident in the 1980s over in the United Kingdom at a joint British-U.S. base where a craft allegedly landed. No, this goes to reports that have been happening over the last few decades. The same type of reports that we have absolutely quashed anecdotal evidence from people who have claimed to have extraterrestrial encounters. But now it's officially on record that this is happening. The timing is strange because it shouldn't be now. So why did it come out? Is there a press to get this information out? Look, they don't need to be reporting on things like this. There's a war in the Ukraine that could escalate at any time. They're still bouncing around with COVID. They're still wondering about inflation and the economy and how it's going to recover. There's big issues out there right now, and we're releasing information about experiencers, military experiencers who have been caught up, some of them healed from their problems. Healed. Doesn't that remind you of the Chris Bledsoe story? It does to me. And it should be resonating with many of you out there who know what's going on and have followed this show since we've started talking about it. Now, I, for one, am very intrigued by this. It's not about the technology anymore. Look, at first it was all about propulsion. I got so sick of hearing the word propulsion and technology and everything to do with these Tic Tacs that we said, what about the people? Hell, 2 weeks ago, I just gave a report at a conference as to why experiencers are the forgotten souls of ufology. And 2 weeks later, boom, my report now is garbage. And I'm okay with that. And all of you should be okay with that. But we need to question it. Because, ladies and gentlemen, I have said this for a number of years. I have stated, what if the government knows who has been taken? We now know they've tracked it within their own people. This goes way beyond the Nimitz. This goes way beyond any other report. This involves real human beings who are now talking about their experiences and have talked about their experiences through government programs. Have they seen aliens? Have they been pushed to become experiencers? Is there an experiencer program that we have test subjects, much like we saw on the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind? Well, that's to be debated. Excuse me. But here's the thing. This is being studied. The results of what is happening to experiencers are being covered on many, many levels. One of those levels is from Rice University, but another level is happening at Stanford University with Professor Dr. Garry Nolan. Garry Nolan, I'm going to call you out right now. You have information that the public needs. And as far as I know from my sources, you're allowed to talk about this. You're allowed to talk about your findings. You're allowed to talk about your studies. It is time for Garry Nolan, the wonderful scientist who has taken this story and ran with it to prove without a reasonable doubt scientifically that there are things happening to the human body for those who get in contact with UFOs or extraterrestrials. We need those results. Even if they're preliminary, it's time for Garry Nolan to come forward and talk about what he's learned. I don't think Garry Nolan is trying to hide like a lot of other scientists have because of government NDAs. What we do know is Garry Nolan has put a lot of his own money into this study. He has talked to a lot of people who are experiencers and studied what has happened to them. He has looked for evidence. He has searched for evidence. He has studied the brain regarding extraterrestrial experiencers and changes to it. It's time to come forward and give us the results. We need more than Luis Elizondo. We've seen Avi Loeb step up. Garry Nolan recently joined the Galileo Project as a scientist. He's worked with Jacques Vallée, the famed UFO scientist, for years, decades. And he knows things. He knows the patterns. And it's all been scientifically justified. Look, Lou Elizondo, Chris Mellon, Sean Cahill, and that entire team that is working cannot continue to do it on their own. It is time for scientific people like Garry Nolan, who is, in my opinion, the number one scientist who can break this story open with factual evidence, to come forward and tell us what he's got. Bring it to the public. This is a story that will hit mainstream media. This is a story that will hit the front pages of the New York Times, the LA Times, or whatever major paper is still viable out there. We need to know. The game has changed, people. The game is no longer about little dots in the sky and whether or not they are proper videos, debunked videos, or whatever. It is now shifted to the people. And whether or not we want to admit that those people who are in this news article, thanks to the DURDS report, are military or not, or some sort of government official, in the end, they are still human beings who have had some sort of extraterrestrial contact. This is a whole different ballgame that all of us should be very aware of. Because while certain people are playing looky-loo up in the sky, trying to find anything that moves, that could be a satellite, or could be a UFO, or a meteor, or space junk, we are now dealing with the effects of humanity. That immediately tells me that disclosure is close. Maybe not the disclosure we want, where they're going to bare all and get naked with the subject. Not going to happen. But we're getting closer to where we need to be. We're now involving people. First, it'll be the military. Then it will be others. But Garry Nolan has to step up and tell us what he knows. He's a good man. He's a smart man. He knows what he's doing. But he is the one person right now who can help the cause in breaking this story of humans and aliens wide open. And that is your Dave 101.